When Jerry Rice says he hates someone, he means it shaped his entire legacy. Today we're breaking down 7 NFL icons he genuinely couldn't stand. If you're enjoying this, give this video some hype. Number 7 is about work ethic versus natural talent. Cris Carter was a Hall of Famer with incredible hands. But Carter claimed he had the best hands in NFL history, better than Rice. He tweeted that God made his hands. That shot at Rice because he'd admitted using stickum adhesive spray receivers used to improve grip. His identity was built on outworking everyone. He caught bricks to toughen his hands. He ran hills until he vomited. When Carter claimed superior hands because God blessed him naturally, it attacked the foundation of who Rice was. Rice said on ESPN radio that it was hard to swallow watching Carter play because he hated seeing such a gifted player not maximize potential through effort. Carter was a notorious trash talker. Rice despised that in receivers. He believed in the silent assassin approach. You catch the ball, hand it to the official, jog back to the huddle. Rice had the rings, the yardage, the receptions. Carter was trying to talk his way into Rice's tier when the statistics proved that wasn't true. Eventually, Carter conceded that Rice was greatest. But that tension never went away. Now, number 6 is about psychological warfare. Darrell Green was the cornerback for Washington with one thing that terrified Jerry Rice: speed. Pure, unmatched speed. Green was the ageless wonder and one of the fastest humans ever to play in the NFL. He could actually run Rice down from behind. Darrell Green revealed that Jerry Rice wouldn't even speak to him. Not pre-game, not during games, not post-game. Green would try to be friendly, and Rice would ignore him or actively avoid him. But Rice later admitted why. The silence was superstition and competitive intensity. Talking to your opponent dullens your edge. Rice hated Green because Green could neutralize everything Rice did through precision. You could execute a perfect double move against most corners and be gone. Against Green, you could beat him clean, and he'd still close the gap and break up the pass. Green eliminated Rice's margin for error. Rice ran a 4.71 second 40 at the combine. Green ran a 4.09 second 40. Rice had to build a psychological wall to compete. The coldness lasted years, but it thawed at a Pro Bowl in Hawaii. Rice finally said, "Hey Darrell, what's up, man?" Green realized the war was over. Once they weren't competing anymore, Rice could afford to be human. Number 5 involves an allegation that basically accused a coach of match fixing. This is about Bill Callahan and Super Bowl XSSV, where the Raiders got demolished by Tampa Bay 48-21. That's humiliating. Years later, Tim Brown publicly accused Callahan of sabotaging the game plan. Tim Brown said Callahan changed the game plan from run heavy to pass heavy less than 48 hours before kickoff. The Raiders had a dominant offensive line and powerful running game. The Buccaneers had a legendary pass defense but were vulnerable to the run. The Buccaneers coach was John Gruden, who used to coach the Raiders. He knew their playbook and audibles. Tim Brown was saying Callahan deliberately switched from the Raiders' strengths to Tampa Bay's strengths. Jerry Rice backed him up. Rice went on ESPN and publicly agreed that Callahan had sabotaged the team. He said he was very surprised that Callahan waited until the last second to change the game plan. Rice's logic was that it made no sense strategically. Why abandon power running for a strategy that exposed Rich Gannon to a ferocious pass rush? Rice also pointed to Callahan's behavior the following season, where everything collapsed. This was different from Rice's other rivalries, because this was about a coach, a superior officer. Rice usually respected the chain of command. But when he perceived a coach was an impediment to winning, that coach became an enemy. Rice accused Callahan of throwing a Super Bowl. Analysts have since dismissed this as ridiculous, but Rice's adherence to the theory reveals he couldn't process failure. He needed to believe in betrayal and sabotage. Number 4 is a proxy war between 2 NFL dynasties. Michael Irvin was the star receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys and 49ers were the 2 superpowers of the entire 1990s. Every time they met, it was the real Super Bowl. Irvin represented everything about Dallas that irritated Rice. The Cowboys were characterized by bravado, excess, arrogance, and aggression. They were America's team, embraced for their rock star lifestyle and swagger. The 49ers were the opposite. They were precision, corporate efficiency, discipline. Rice described their matchups as real nasty. He viewed Irvin as the embodiment of a culture he detested. Irvin's constant trash-talking, his physical style of play, his flamboyant celebrations were antithetical to Rice's approach. Rice believed in finesse, not aggression. The hatred between Rice and Irvin was genuine and zero-sum. Every Super Bowl ring that Irvin won was a ring that Rice believed belonged to San Francisco. The Cowboys physically bullied the 49ers in the early 90s. Rice had to summon a deep personal animosity toward Irvin to match that emotional intensity. The rivalry pushed Rice to perhaps his greatest season in 1995 when he set the then record for receiving yards with 1848. The hatred was fuel, it worked. Number 3 is a rivalry fought in the court of public opinion about legacy and who gets to wear the crown as the greatest receiver ever. Randy Moss came along after Rice and claimed he was the greatest receiver. On a podcast, Moss said Rice was 3rd or 4th best. That's a major bomb. That's spitting in the face of someone who'd been undisputed king for decades. Moss argued he had peak dominance that exceeded anything Rice ever did. His supporters pointed to his 2007 season with Tom Brady, where he caught 23 touchdowns, claiming that exceeded any single season of Rice's career in pure explosiveness. Rice's reaction was immediate, defensive, and visceral. It showed just how sensitive he was about his historical standing. He went to social media and posted a side-by-side statistical comparison. His caption was brutal. "You just got mossed." He was taking Moss's own brand and using it against him. He was crushing Moss with the only language that mattered: statistics, ring count, yardage total. But underneath this was something deeper. Rice's disdain for Moss stemmed from perception of wasted potential. Rice caught bricks to toughen his hands. He ran hills until he vomited. He willed himself into being the greatest through sheer force of effort. Moss, on the other hand, had the attitude that he played when he wanted to play. To Rice, that was a sacrilege against the profession of wide receiver. Rice said on ESPN radio it was hard watching Moss play because he hated seeing such a gifted player not maximize potential through effort. Moss represented the antithesis of the Jerry Rice way. Rice achieved greatness through maximizing every ounce of talent. Moss achieved greatness in spite of his inconsistencies. When Rice put out that rebuttal, he even tagged his energy drink goat fuel. He was making it clear his legacy was a commercial and reputation asset that had to be defended against usurpers trying to steal his crown. That's the hatred of the king watching the prince try to steal the throne. Number 2 is a rivalry that transcended the football field and became about something that ate at Rice for years. When the San Francisco 49ers signed Deion Sanders in 1994, it created one of the most toxic situations in the team's history. Rice was explicit about his feelings. He said, "I hated him." Not disliked, not competed hard against, hated. This animosity was rooted in a fundamental divergence in professional philosophy. Rice's work ethic was legendary and basically obsessive-compulsive. He caught bricks. He ran the steep hills of San Carlos Park every single day. He viewed Moss's flashy persona and dual-sport commitment to Major League Baseball as an affront to the sanctity of the game. But it goes deeper than just philosophy. There was a professional fear underneath. Rice admitted that Deion Sanders was one of the few defensive backs in the entire NFL who forced him to alter his complete game plan. Against Sanders, Rice couldn't just rely on precision and practice. Against Sanders, he had to double move, triple move, come to the line with a full plan. Sanders possessed the athletic ability to neutralize Rice's precision in a way that no amount of preparation could fully overcome. In the zero-sum game of an NFL snap, Sanders was the only variable Rice couldn't fully control. When Sanders joined the 49ers in 1994, the front office was making a strategic mercenary move to dismantle the Dallas Cowboys dynasty that had blocked San Francisco's path to the Super Bowl for 2 consecutive years. But this tactical brilliance created a chemical explosion in the locker room because it required integrating the team's most hated adversary into its inner sanctum. The tension was so palpable that team leadership recognized they were looking at a catastrophic failure if the 2 alpha males didn't resolve their history. Rice and Sanders actually held a confrontational meeting to clear the air before they could even coexist as teammates. Very bad words were exchanged. Years of accumulated on-field hostility had to be purged before they could be on the same team. This meeting wasn't just about interpersonal conflict. It was about defining the hierarchy of the franchise. Rice needed to make sure that the primetime show, the dancing, the bandanas, the media circus, wouldn't eclipse the championship culture that he and Joe Montana had built. The financial context made it worse. 1994 was the first year of the NFL salary cap. Multiple 49ers veterans had to restructure their contracts and take pay cuts to accommodate Sanders' arrival. For Rice, who prided himself on loyalty and the team concept, watching teammates sacrifice financially to bring in a player he hated had to be a bitter pill to swallow. The bad words spoken in their meeting likely touched on that financial friction, the feeling that Sanders was being anointed the savior of a team Rice had carried for a decade. But here's the thing, the détente worked. It was a case study in how mutual ambition can suppress personal dislike. The friction between the two actually sharpened Rice's focus, and the 49ers made a dominant run to Super Bowl 91. The relationship evolved from hatred to something like guarded mutual respect. Rice would eventually acknowledge that while he hated Sanders, he was the best defensive player to ever play the game. Sanders won Defensive Player of the Year in 1994. Rice won his third Super Bowl ring. The hatred got repurposed into a championship drive. In professional sports, cohesion doesn't require friendship. It requires a unified target. Number one is the final piece of this puzzle, and Tim Brown is the one who brings all the psychological complexity of Jerry Rice into focus. Tim Brown was Rice's teammate on the Oakland Raiders, a Hall of Fame receiver in his own right. But here's where it gets complicated. Tim Brown was the one who publicly accused Bill Callahan of sabotaging the Super Bowl, and Rice backed him up publicly. But this wasn't some comfortable alliance between two teammates against a coach. This was the beginning of a rift that would consume both of them. The sabotage accusation was that Callahan had changed the game plan less than 48 hours before kickoff. From a run-heavy offense that played to the Raiders' strengths into a pass-heavy scheme that played directly into Tampa Bay's legendary pass defense. Tim Brown said this was deliberate, that Callahan didn't like the team. And Jerry Rice, in a shocking move that broke his usual respect for the chain of command, publicly backed him up. He said he was surprised Callahan waited until the last second to change the game plan, and he believed Callahan had sabotaged the game. Rice even pointed to Callahan's behavior in the following season as evidence that Callahan wanted to destroy the organization. What makes this rivalry unique in Rice's arsenal is that it reveals his inability to process failure. When the Raiders lost that Super Bowl in humiliating fashion, Rice couldn't accept that they just got outcoached and out-executed. He needed to believe in betrayal and sabotage from within because that protected his ego and his image. He hated Callahan because Callahan represented the theft of what would have been a fourth Super Bowl ring, a ring he would have earned without relying on Joe Montana or Steve Young, a ring that would have validated his independence and his greatness as an individual. When you pull back and look at all 7 of these rivalries together, you see a clear and consistent pattern. Jerry Rice's hatred wasn't arbitrary. It wasn't random personal animosity. It was functional. It was a tool, just as important as his cleats or his gloves. Rice was a master at perceiving slight, at manufacturing disrespect, at finding reasons to believe he was under attack even after he'd already set every major NFL record. He maintained a rookie mindset, that desperate fear of being cut or replaced, even at the peak of his dominance. He tricked his own brain into believing he was the underdog despite being the most dominant player in the sport's history. The functional paranoia he lived with, the hatred he cultivated toward these 7 icons, that wasn't a flaw in his character. It was a fundamental feature of his greatness. In the brutal environment of professional football, contentment is the precursor to decline. By maintaining intense animosities toward the flashy Sanders, the talented Moss, the speedy Green, and all the others, Rice manufactured a perpetual state of crisis. He convinced himself he was always under attack, always disrespected, always one step away from being overtaken. This paranoia, manifested as hatred for his peers, was the engine that drove him to run the hills, catch the bricks, and stand alone at the top of the NFL pantheon. Behind every grudge was the mindset of a man who refused to rest, refused to lose, and refused to let anyone else claim the title of the greatest. That unrelenting competitive fire and burning hatred for anyone who questioned his dominance separated Jerry Rice from everyone else. That's what made him the GOAT. His 7 rivalries didn't just define different eras of football. They defined the psychological architecture of the greatest receiver to ever play the game. This is true greatness at its highest level.